Coming from a family of practitioners and clinicians, my dinner table talk was debriefing a surgery. I would hear about things from a clinical nature. I would go on house calls when I was a kid. So medicine was always something that was incredibly fascinating to me. You know, a lot of people don't understand this when they hear it, but they talk about practicing medicine. You don't really understand that the word practicing means they are practicing medicine the same way you practice basketball. So you're listening to these things and things that are working, things aren't working. So naturally in HR, I gravitated towards health insurance because people needed that to help them at times at their darkest hour. We talk a lot about in this country that it's really not health insurance, it's sick care or sick insurance. And I agree with that sometimes.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing David Voorhees. David is the founder and CEO of True Captive Insurance, a one-of-a-kind alternative to traditional self-funded or fully insured arrangements, providing small to medium businesses with innovative healthcare options at a substantial long-term discount, while creating programs that employees feel the value in the investment made by their employers. Prior to founding True Captive, he held several executive positions in human resources and in student recruiting at for-profit colleges. He has a Bachelor of Science in Management from the University of Phoenix and graduated summa cum laude with a Master of Management in Human Resources Management from the University of Phoenix. You can learn more about David at truecaptive.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to David.
David, I'd like to welcome you this morning to the Corporate Couch.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We talk about a lot of things, but we will not talk about the New York Yankees because I know you're a fan, and obviously I am. But since they didn't make the playoffs for the first time since 2016, we'll keep that off the table. So
probably a wise choice. Will keep me in good spirits.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk to you. You and I met through Scott Havens when you were heading up HR at eSolutions. So we met over at whatever coffee shop is off College in Antioch, so whatever that is. Anyhow, excited to talk to you and being the founder and CEO of True Captive now. I can't wait to delve into your career journey up to this point and see what exciting things you're doing at True Captive. So let's start with a fun question. So even that people know you fairly well, David, what one thing would surprise them about you?
Oh, interesting. Well, since this is called the Corporate Couch, I'll give you a deep answer. You know, I think a lot of people think of me as intimidating at times, or I'm very sure of myself, I'm very confident, and there's a picture that you see that's like a little lion cub, and then in the reflection, the lion cub sees a full lion. And for a lot of my career, as I was trying to develop that confidence in what I did, most people saw the lion and I saw the cub. And so it was one of those things where I think most people are surprised to hear that I had to learn confidence. It wasn't just built in me. It was working with different types of people, gaining feedback from other people, trying to tap into the things that they shared I was good at, and trying to work on the side on the things that I knew I needed to get better at. But that's most people's, I'm shocked to hear about David, is I can come off as very confident. And, it was something that I had to build over years, not, just walked out of life and go, hey, I can do anything.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. You grew up in Kansas City, I believe?
I did, born in Miami, Florida, but then migrated to the great state of Kansas.
The great state of Kansas, love it. So, what was fun for you growing up? What did you love doing?
Lots of things. I think the first thing was snow. Coming from Miami, not a lot of snow. I remember the first time in seeing that, I looked at mom and I said, "Look, mom, crab holes." I saw my feet doing that. But loved basketball. Have always loved basketball, which is great to be in Kansas. Like being in the outdoors. Absolutely love sports. So growing up, those are the things that I was interested in participating in, being competitive. I was fortunate enough to go on trips with my family and learn about different cultures and different places in the country. And I've always been a fan of history, so learning about our country and the history of how it's adapted itself. So it was a good childhood.
Yeah, very nice. When you were young, did you have aspirations of like when I grow up, I want to be in the NBA, or what was that for you?
I'm sure there was a time that I wanted to be in the NBA, but I also was a realist, and so I never thought that was going to be something that I would be able to accomplish. I did want to be an Air Force pilot. I wanted to fly the F-16. I had set everything up to do that and go to Colorado Springs and really wanted that more than just about anything. Unfortunately, my eyes weren't good enough, and when I talked to the recruiter, they said, and this is 25, 26 years ago, like, yeah, the best you're going to be able to fly is a cargo plane. And when you're a kid and you wanted to fly the F-16 and hearing the cargo plane, you're like, it doesn't sound that cool. Now as you get older and realize what those things can do, maybe a little more cool. But that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to fly the F-16, and that's my goal. So if anybody listening can do that, it takes a sitting senator to get you in the F-16 trainer. So if anybody knows a sitting senator or maybe a retiring F-16 pilot who's willing to, slide me into the seat, I'm all ears. You let me know.
Yeah, well, Baron Lucas, I interviewed 2 weeks ago. He was in Top Gun, ran a battalion of 1,500 fighter pilots in his 30-year career in the Marines. Actually, was in the part of the well, not part of the filming, but he was on at Miramar when they filmed the original Top Gun. So
Wow.
I tried to get him. He was under a non-disclosure, and so I tried to egg him on to see if he actually got in a fight with Tom Cruise or anything like that. But so anyhow, he did not reveal anything. But here's your guy. If if you need that, talk about your college journey. What was kind of your initial major or and final major, and might have been the same. What talk about that and why'd you pick that major in the college and
Yeah, definitely didn't finish with what I started with. So father and grandfather, both physicians, one a surgeon, one a general practitioner. Actually, but you won't see this, but behind me is my grandfather's medical degree. And actually, unbeknownst to me, that would really drive my career and my passion for helping people, maybe not in the same way he did. So I went pre-med, went to the University of Kansas. I think when I finished all together, I had 5 or 6 majors. I graduated with 180 undergraduate credits when you only need 120. So the joke was I was Van Wilder and I would tell everybody, but I wasn't that cool, which is 100% true. I finished with business management and a minor in psychology. Ultimately got my master's in management and a minor in human resources. So I liked learning a lot, and I would change my major and then I'd focus on the core classes. And what I had to do, I had to go back and fill out my electives. That's the part that I missed, which most people, they avoid their major credits because those are the harder classes, the 300 and 400s. Those are the ones that I loved, like child psychology, abnormal psychology was fascinating. IO psychology, the psychology of business, which is really fun. So spent a lot of time, probably more time than I should have in college. Wasn't ready to grow up. My parents loved that. They were really fans of me spending a great deal of time in college. But ultimately, looking back and reflecting, it was a good experience. I learned how to move through the world and learned a lot of stuff that I don't use today, but at the time I found very, very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, that's 180 credit hours. That might be the
That's a
record
feat.
that that I've heard of based on all the guests. But I love that. What was your first job post college after you graduated, and how did you get it?
First, I'll say my real first real job. My first real job was at Sprint, and I was a department assistant three. Uh, Basically, it was more of an administrative assistant. I did a lot of data entry, but it was funny. This is probably 3 years ago. I was cleaning out some of my stuff that I had from my past, and I saw the first presentation that I did in my career. And guess what it was? It was a employee benefits presentation. I
Oh
was
my,
working on
wow.
presenting to Sprint employees about healthcare, and it was on a 3x5 disc, right? Like it wasn't a floppy disk, but we had those little 3x5 inch discs.
Yeah, yeah.
And I saw that and I just smiled because, as I mentioned, my grandfather had a great deal to do with my career path. And that was one of those things that at the time, no idea that was my first presentation. But look where I'm at now and how that was there. So I was at Sprint. Um, what a interesting experience for your first job. It was I've had so many good educational moments in my career. This one was the first one of there were a lot of miserable people there because there was a lot of turnover and they were afraid of losing their job. And, when one person puts something in your ear, you hear it and you gossip and it's like there's just so much angst. And I didn't know any better. I just put my head down and I worked my butt off. And I subsequently kept getting the nod to do different things. But that was such a great education. Obviously, I didn't like people being unhappy, but at the same time, that they just perpetually went through layoffs. But I remember very vividly, I always had aspirations. I always wanted to be promoted, and I wanted to learn more and take on more responsibility. When you're younger, you have really good ambition. Maybe you don't know how to control it, so sometimes that wears on people. But I remember pointing at the director's office and saying, "Hey, how long is it going to take me to get there?" And they said, most people could probably get there in 15. If you work really hard, you can get there in 10 years. And I thought to myself, no, I don't want to be waiting that long to get into that position because, again, enthusiastic, a lot of ambition, maybe a little blind confidence that I shouldn't have yet, but I did. And I said, I'm not going to do that. And so, that propelled me into other areas of my career. But the first one was Sprint, Department Assistant 3.
Yeah, love the title because it means nothing really outside of the
Right.
sprint world. Mine first one out of college, I worked for AT&T. I went through their management leadership program in software development. I was an MPS 22, member programming staff 22. Yeah, so I left AT&T, went to Sprint in when they were about 18 months old in the long distance division, which how Sprint started. But yeah, I mean, I was so used to layoffs, and it was crazy how many times we had layoffs, and so I totally understand the psyche. But and you mentioned this also, but Sprint was a great learning ground. I mean, you got to do a lot of different things because and whether that was by choice or because other people didn't want to do it. But you were probably there in post right before the Nextel merger, or when
Right
was it?
before I was there for the next time. I mean, the big
Yeah,
fanfare and the gym and everything.
right, right.
It was wild. And funny enough, this is before being able to remote into a computer became a big thing.
Yep.
I built a tunnel so I could. And again, I was ambitious. And when you're ambitious, you need to work harder than everybody else. So I had built a tunnel into my work desktop, and I would be able to do data entry at home at night and over the weekend. And
Wow.
so I was able to exceed expectations by figuring out how to be a little bit more efficient. I don't think IT would have been happy to know that I knew how to do that.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're going to trust somebody, trust me.
Right, there you go. And you were doing work. It
Right.
wasn't like you were hacking the system.
No, I was typing in data. I was taking
Yeah.
data from one area and then transposing it into another area.
Yeah.
Glorious work.
Yeah. You weren't kind of fudging with the payroll system. Every every cent you were rounding up and putting it into your payroll
Boy, wouldn't
per
that be
paycheck.
that would be a good thing. I did not make a lot of money. It's funny. I remember after graduating college, I was sitting on the front deck with my dad, and all those philosophical conversations you have with your folks. This was one of them, and my dad had asked me, how much do you think you're going to make? And I said, I'm not accepting a job for less than $36,000. There's no way I can work for anything less than $36,000. My first job at Sprint was $24,000. So one, not only was I incorrect, but no, I certainly did not put extra pennies into that check. The good old intestinal fortitude and lesson of $24,000.
Love it, love it. So, looks like you spent a fair amount of your career in the kind of the online learning space with University of Phoenix and Brown Mackey. Kind of walk us through that and your learnings in that environment.
Yeah, what an interesting experience, and one that from a cultural and leadership perspective was incredibly rewarding. Uh, you know, for-profit education, and you can read a lot about this. There certainly is a sales culture to enrolling students, and I felt like our campus here in Kansas City was special because yes, we had numbers that they wanted us to hit, but we really did believe we were helping adults get education that were going to help advance their careers, and we did. So the fact that we were trying to get them into school, didn't seem like we were doing harm because the leaders were really focused on how we were able to change some of these people's quality of life. So in that world, the sales culture, I was really good at that. I was really good at talking to people and listening to what their hopes and their dreams were and trying to say like those things won't work without a college degree. And I knew that because part of me staying in school so long was I didn't want to give up being a kid. I didn't want to give up flexibility and freedom of what being a kid is. You have little odd jobs and stuff, but you don't have the type of responsibility you do as an adult, and you don't have the earning potential. And I dodged that as long as I could until ultimately somebody told me, if you don't get a degree, you're not going to be able to get a job. And I remember that vividly. And I got to work, and I finished up very quickly after that. But in that space, I was very good at helping talk to students. And I was always interested in helping my neighbors, whether they wanted it or not. I always had this leadership characteristic. And the campus president at the time pulled me aside and said, hey, here's the thing. You're going to be good no matter what you do. We know that. We can lean on you if we need to do something. You're going to get it done, and you're going to lead the pack. He goes, but you can be one of two people. You can be that sales mercenary, and you can be the best of the best. And, maybe some people like you, and maybe some people tolerate you, and maybe a lot of people don't like you. Or you can be the light that shines bright and helps others light shine bright as well. Kind of the ships raising tides conversation. And that dawned on me. I didn't really like it because there were some other conversations that he, said there's a fine line between arrogance and confidence. And he was right. But I went home and I reflected on that. I was like, look, if I want to be a leader, if I really want to help other people grow and learn lessons and get better, then I'm going to have to take that to heart. I can go find a way to make money. Making money is not hard if you want to work hard, but I do want to lead and I do want to help. And so ultimately got put into a leadership position, ran one of the top 5 campuses in the country, really built a great culture, had a lot of great leaders around me. We were also a bunch of stupid kids doing stupid things. And, you kind of reflect on that and go, gosh, I wish I didn't do that. But at the same time, it's like, you're a kid, you're learning how to be an adult. Things are funny that aren't funny now. Like when I'm at the University of Kansas basketball games and kids are screaming obscenities and all sorts of things at the ref. And I'm like, I have my 6-year-old kid here, quiet down. But then I realized 20 years ago, I was the idiot in the stands yelling, F you, ref. So it's full circle.
Right. What kind of turned, flipped the light switch? You're here, you are at 180 credit hours in college. Not that you didn't have ambition, but you didn't want to take that next step into adulthood. And then you get to Sprint, and you're a hard driving, hey, I'm not waiting 10 years to be a director, definitely not 15. I want to be a director in 5 years or whatever. And yeah, because they all had the hard walled office with you can close the door, that good stuff. Get me out of the cube farm and get me into a hard wall. So what flipped the switch for you?
I've always been competitive. and I'm always competitive with myself. So when I hear things like, I want to do that better, I want to do it faster, I want to be more efficient, whatever it is, it's just something innate in me, and it's always been that way. So, as I looked at these things, it's challenges to help me continue to grow. And as you get older, the idea of growth changes and you become wiser. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday. I happened to be in Fort Smith, Arkansas with a customer, and one of our customers happens to be one of the largest ticket makers in the country. And I got to see all these tickets from all these things, from Sugar Ray Leonard to Olympics to fairs, and I just felt this feeling of just gratitude that I was able to see all these things and think about all these people having joy doing them. But in your 20s, you don't understand that. That's just not there, and it's just the evolution of life. And so, no matter what I've done, though, it's always been, I want to be able to do something better than the person did it before me. And I always wanted to be able to bring more people into it. And ever since that conversation at the University of Phoenix, that became that shtick of, okay, listen, I want to help others get there too. Because if we can do it together, we can probably do it better. We can be more fulfilled. We can make better value together. We can make a bigger difference type thing. But I've always just had that gear of, I want to be able to do something better. And I'm hard on myself. And it's the truth. There's nobody that's going to say anything to me that I haven't said worse to myself.
Did you have, whether you had met them or just through books, but did you have, one or more leadership mentors that really impacted you, that helped kind of form, how you developed as a leader?
Not directly. Not directly. I'm a student of anybody willing to talk to me about everything. I'm willing to listen to it. But I've never had somebody that I had regular meetings with, or, I had a boss that was great. And I mean, we'd have one-on-ones and we'd have conversations, but never that mentor. Being that kid who was ambitious and maybe a little bit more confident than he should be, you have that air about you that I can figure it out on my own. And there has been lots of lessons in that. I mean, I have taught myself how to do countless things, and there may have been ways to do it more fast or maybe better, but there was something humbling in those lessons because there was a lot of failure in it. Not that I recommend everybody be that person, but that was very humbling to me, to try things on my own and fail and then learn how to do them, because I don't have quit in me. But there never was that one person that did that. Now, book wise, I haven't been a giant book reader. So if people are looking for gifts to give me, don't give me the latest autobiography, because it's not something that I'll read. But for whatever reason, happenstance is my best stance. And I've had a lot of good luck in my life. I remember standing in the doorway of my manager at the University of Phoenix, and she did a great job of teaching leadership and things like that. But she had a book that, for whatever reason, I'm like, I'm going to read this thing. It was the 21 Irrefutable Laws by John C. Maxwell, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And for whatever reason, I saw it and I read it, and it changed the way I looked at management and leadership. And that book ultimately became a foundational piece for how I tried to build cultures and how I tried to adapt, and how do you integrate different departments. And so that was, if there was a book that I would recommend to any leader who's just thinking about, how do I understand adapting, building, growing, that was the book for me.
Yeah, so you work for a lot of different companies, and we'll keep True Captive aside for now. But DST, Nolan Real Estate Services, eSolutions, Informa, where you were head of HR for the Americas. What out of all those companies, including Brown Mackey and University of Phoenix, which one had the best culture for you, and why?
Well, they all had different cultures, and they all had different good parts and bad parts. And so I couldn't tell you which one had the best culture, because they each had their moments. They each had their high moments where things were great and people were performing and people were happy. And then they each had their moments where people were not kind to one another and just didn't treat each other well. And when that happens, you have a breakdown in function and your performance lag. So I can say that there are times that each one of those roles were incredibly rewarding. And there are times where I question what in the heck was I doing there. But that's the world of HR. So again, we've had the fortune of having one of the better years in the country as an insurance carrier. So we're a captive insurance carrier. We take risk. We're not a broker. A lot of people, ultimately think we're brokering. Those are our partners. They're out there selling our product. But we're having one of the better years in the country. And I've had other captives call me, and other large carriers call me and go, how are you doing it? Or, you're a first time CEO. How are you able to do this? And I was like, HR. They go, what do you mean by HR? It's like, well, first of all, you have absolutely no authority, zero, right? You might have a gavel, but it's one that you probably shouldn't use if you can avoid it. So you have to lead through influence. And then since you're working in different departments, if you're smart, you're learning, you're listening, you're trying to figure that out. But you also have to get the leaders of each of those departments to feel like what they're doing matters to them and hits on those notes, but also positioning them to be focused towards the major goal. And that is what I learned how to do in those different careers. And so, or not careers, different companies. That was just very, very rewarding for me. And now I can look back and say, wow, what an impact that made on me. We'll say it was funny. I don't know if I took great offense to this, but it pissed me off. And I will let this person remain nameless. So if they hear me talking about that, they'll know who they are. But I was interviewing for a role that I really wanted, at a very well-known philanthropic natured organization in Kansas City. And I'd been recommended for it by several people, and they were using somebody to help them with this. So they kind of forced me into that interview. I was a candidate of choice, we'll call it that way. But I don't think they wanted me to interview it. It wasn't the company, but the people placing it. And I sat down, we were having this interview, and he said the same thing, you worked here, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes, you know what? I have no idea if you're good at what you do, but I can tell you you've been resourceful. And man, did that piss me off. I mean, it was interesting. I will tell you that. But you know what? That's become fire for me. It's like, yes, I am resourceful. And that is a great skill to have in any company you are in. So as you sling that as a comment that you did not mean to be positive. I kind of tucked it away and said, let me use it as rocket fuel when days aren't going the way they need to, or trying to change an industry that is largely foundational to the country. And when days are resistance filled, keep pushing, keeping that fuel, because damn it, I'm resourceful. So
interesting.
I share that.
You're the Michael Jordan of the corporate world. Like Michael got fueled by criticism and people that said he couldn't do something, or getting cut, which he technically didn't get cut as a sophomore from the basketball team. He just didn't make varsity. So the story is, he got cut from the basketball team as a sophomore in high school, but Jordan was renowned for, people criticized him or said something that he couldn't do. He was all out. I mean, YouTube is Hall of Fame acceptance speech. I mean, he took it out on people years later. Not that I'm saying you're going to do that, David, when you get.
I could, but I could. No, listen, what a wonderful compliment. Thank you. I don't know if I'm quite on that level, but it is something, having a 6-year-old boy who, boys love to be dared. Boys love to have challenges. And as you get older, you start to realize sometimes people daring you and challenging you don't have your best interest in heart. They want you to do something because they don't want to do it. And so as I think about that, the people that have challenged me, other people have doubted me. I've got another story about doubt when I started True Captive. But if you use it to create something that's positive, if you use it as fuel that can help push you to directions that are, your intentions are pure, it can be very helpful. But conversely, you can let those chips sour you very easily. And then I've had moments where I've been annoyed by stuff that people have said, and I've been in places where I'm probably not happy that I let it bother me as much as I have. So it's a fine line. It really is. I mean, it can be rocket fuel. It can help you persevere, but it can also really do harm if you just fester on it, because it's not going to do any good. Kobe Bryant says this, and he's right. If you win the next day, you put on your pants and you got to go through the journey, right? And if you lose the next day, you got to put on your pants and go through the journey. The constant is the journey. The win or the loss is largely irrelevant. I mean, you want to appreciate it, you want to celebrate it, but my journey is going to be the same the next day. It doesn't matter what I did. And that's huge. And I think we can all remember that. Use the things that you can use, the things that you can't, try to get rid of them as fast as you can. It's human to be upset with people that maybe say things to you that are not polished, but use what you can and discard the rest, and run as hard as you can.
Yeah, no, I love that advice. That's great. Yeah, so I mean, obviously successful. Heading up HR for different companies, eSolutions, Informa. So it looked like when you were in Informa, you started to kind of bake this idea of true captive insurance. So tell us about that and what drove you and.
So, coming from a family of practitioners and clinicians, my dinner talk table was, or my dinner table talk was maybe debriefing a surgery. I mean, I would hear about things from a clinical nature. I would go on house calls when I was a kid. So medicine was always something that was incredibly fascinating to me. A lot of people don't understand this when they hear it, but they talk about practicing medicine. You don't really understand that the word practicing means they are practicing medicine the same way you practice basketball, right? So you're listening to these things and things that are working, things aren't working. So naturally in HR, I gravitated towards health insurance because, people needed that to help them at times at their darkest hour. We talk a lot about in this country that it's really not health insurance, it's sick care or sick insurance. And I agree with that sometimes. But I gravitated towards that, and I have an ability that when people talk to me, I take it as a huge compliment when they share with me things that are personal, and they stay with me because somebody just trusted me with something that is incredibly private. And so when I started to hear things about people's conditions or things that they were facing, it became a challenge to me to find a solution in a way that I could. Right? I wasn't practicing medicine. I can't cure anything. But maybe I could make something more efficient and effective so you could worry about getting healthy versus thinking about how you could afford something. So I became somewhat of a fixer or a closer. Is I would come in and I would rebuild a healthcare plan and create efficiency and try to understand what in that culture would fit with certain components of healthcare insurance plans. And became very good at that. And it was fun for me. It was a passion of mine. So, and I'm thinking there, I had been pitched by other captives in my seat, prior years. And I'm a big believer of captives. Even our competitors, I have great admiration for what they're doing. I have a lot of celebratory things to say about the things that they do. I'm a captive believer.
David, I know it's your industry, but explain the concept of a captive to our audience.
Yeah, captive effectively is think of it an umbrella over a pool of unaffiliated companies. So there are different companies that pool together to create leverage in the market, and they do that in different components. So they do it in property and casualty, so workers' comp, auto. They do it in facilities, and then they do it, which is older than what we do, which is a captive over healthcare. So health risk. Now it's been around for 30 years, so it's not like it's brand new. But there are some pretty big names in the industry that have been doing it for a while, and I'm appreciative of that too, because they had to sling it out and educate the market, and now we're here, and we're still having to educate the market, but that market was educated before we got there. So when I was thinking about this at Informa, the biggest two obstacles in any health insurance plan from a corporate perspective are one, it's misalignment. That's obstacle number one. So insurance companies aren't honest with people, and they should, because business owners understand this. I tell people all the time, insurance is easy. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, it's simple. I got to make more money than I lose, right? Because if I lose more money than I make, I now am in trouble because I can't function in my business. But we've been circling the drain of charging less for the risk that we have because we have to be competitive in the market, but all you're doing is making what you're doing riskier. So that's the first part. It's financially we're misaligned, and you'll hear a lot about in the industry that misalignment. So that was the first piece that I said. I was like, all right, got to fix that. And then the second piece is we kept regurgitating the same plans for every single company. You'd have 2 plans, you have 3 plans, there are PPO plans, so you have a copay and an out-of-pocket, but they weren't built in the image of the company. So for all the companies that I have been in, every single one was different. Some were younger, some were older, some were white collar, some were blue collar. And those people consume insurance very differently. So if you listen to what people want and you give them something that they can use and understand, they follow the plan, they follow the program, they have a better experience. And what happens when people have better experiences? The financial rewards occur. So your company spends less on insurance. And so that was the 2 things that I was just driving me nuts of how can I do that? Create financial alignment for the organization, and then create a better experience and build plans that were for the culture that they were serving. And that's where I landed, is build an insurance company. By the way, I do have a minor screw loose. I decided to do this in the midst of a global pandemic. So that was interesting. But the idea was build the insurance company from the group up, not from the insurance company down. Like I said, insurance is easy. So if I understand the concept of making more money than I lose, then I build my entire philosophy around that. The problem is that your goal is to make money and your byproduct is maybe help people, despite what the commercials say. That's the byproduct. If you build the company to help people, the byproduct is making money. So it's not like we don't want to make money. I joke about this all the time. It's the truest thing I could tell you. If I describe myself in 3 seconds or less, I'm a bleeding heart and a raging capitalist. And those 2 things keep each other honest. So I'm never going to tell you that insurance companies shouldn't make money. I am going to tell you that they should just be honest about it, because people understand that, and you'd be transparent and work together. So we did that. We said, look, if we start at the company and go up, the insurance piece is easy. And the byproduct has been really happy and satisfied employees. And then the byproduct is very profitable for our members and ourselves as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed a fair amount of people that have started companies during the pandemic, so we'll touch on that. But I mean, but once you went, because you kind of were baking the idea, looked like when you were still at Informa, but once you left Informa and you were full-time the CEO of True Captive Insurance, kind of 6 months in to that full-time, David, what was your biggest surprise outside that there was a global pandemic, probably?
Well, I mean, there were so many surprises along the way. I think the biggest surprise was the anxiety and the fear. I went it alone for a long time. Now, granted, I'm an efficient guy, so I could keep up with all the work. But I mean, there was so much anxiety and so much pressure on making sure that I was building something that was going to stand the test of time. And I remember my wife very vividly, who, my greatest partner of all, said, because I wouldn't hire somebody. I said, what if I fail? What if I have to lay them off? What if the company doesn't go? She goes, listen, these are adults you're talking to. They understand what they're getting themselves into. They know that they're not going to work for Google. They're going to work for something that has, some risk and some volatility. So you let them make that decision. Don't make the decision for them. It's so wise, right? Because I was killing myself doing all this stuff on my own, and I started to bring in people. But that was the biggest surprise, is how much anxiety it is to do that. And you start to learn who you can trust and who are associates, and then who you should probably stay away from. That's another big thing. Just because somebody doesn't have your best interest in mind, that doesn't mean that they're bad. It could mean that they're bad, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. It just means you should know better than to spend a great deal of time with them or put anything that is risky in their hands. And there are some people that, you want to have as a trusted associate. And then there's some people you hold on to like your life depends on it, because no matter what, they're going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear, or they're going to help run through that wall with you or protect you when you're at a low moment. Because, despite being a CEO, despite running a company, despite having all the experience that I have, there are moments where I question, like, holy cow, what'd I do? this is bananas. This was not the right choice. I've put my family at risk. In life, one of the greatest pleasures I have is being a father and a husband, and I'm going to fail. And that just brings all the anxiety. So that was the biggest surprise. There were a couple other surprises along the lines of really in insurance, how little people know how insurance really works. That was a huge surprise. 3 years in, I am one of the experts in our field. It's insanity. I have to remind myself that sometimes because it's hard for me to fathom. There's that cub again, right? Not the lion, the cub going,
Right.
how have I been here 3 years and I'm one of the experts in my field? That shouldn't happen. But I am, and I have to remind myself that. And that was the second piece. So the anxiety and pressure was one, and two was how little a lot of people in this industry truly know about the mechanics of the financials, how it works, how risk distribution works, and how do you create efficiency, and who do you need to help with that efficiency.
And when you say that was a surprise in terms of what people didn't know about insurance, you're not talking about the general employee. You're talking about the people at the
In the
company
field.
that are in charge
Yes.
of the healthcare plan. Yeah, interesting.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very
it was
interesting.
it was very interesting, and I understand it. Again, if you go back to my HR, I focus on people, right? I want to understand what makes people click, what makes them fragile, and how do you help them feel less fragile because they can be more efficient. But I realized that you get thrust into these roles that are high pressure. They have a lot of zeros behind them, so there's a lot of performance behind it, and they're afraid to admit that they maybe don't know about something. Because that might make them weak, or someone might perceive that as weakness. And in fact, some of the best people in this industry are ones who have been in it way longer than we have and I have. Like, would you just explain this to me a little bit more? I want to understand it. I don't need to know it at your level, but I need to understand a little bit better. And I'm going, what a great compliment that is to me to ask me. It makes me feel better about what I do, and I get to educate you. And in this conversation, you're going to educate me on things that I didn't know either. That to me is one of the biggest things professionally that our field could do, is just it's a word that nobody likes. Be more vulnerable and say, I don't know this. And coming from my old seat, when I had people selling me stuff, when I had people telling me something and they said, I don't know, I immediately knew I could trust them. Sounds weird, but they said, I don't know, because that means you're telling me you don't. And then I wanted you to follow up with, I'll go find out.
Yeah.
But when you said, I don't know, that was huge. Cool. Instead of
Yeah.
telling me something and going, oh, that's a lie to bull.
Yeah. Well, and again, when when you're the founder or CEO and you're a company size of one, obviously you're doing a lot of things. But and again, I don't know how many contract employees or whatever you have, but you seem to run lean. I mean, just on LinkedIn, you have 8 employees associated with. So how do you manage everything you're doing with like 8 people, at least, like I said, according to LinkedIn?
Yeah, so efficiency is one of the things that I pride myself on. And one thing I learned about being a head of HR and serving CEOs is a lot of them will evaluate their own success by the size of their company. And growth and size means that they're being successful, and it doesn't. And I had a very good leader at eSolutions that taught me that. He would say, if you're going to do something, try it with 1 or 2 people. Don't hire 10 people. And if it fails, you got to fire 8 and then maybe find a home for the 2 people that are good. Hire 1 or 2 people, prove out the process. And then if it works, let's hire. We've been very fortunate to have a lot of people interested in our business and would love to invest and would love to partner with us. And they shake their heads too. And I said, the first thing you're going to tell me to do is hire like 20 or 30 people, because businesses at our revenue size typically have 30 to 40 employees. But why do we need 30 and 40 employees when we can do it with 8? We need to build our infrastructure around mainly customer interaction. We do a really good job at where we're at in size of having people adaptable and available to do that. But as we grow, that's where we're going to need to spend our money in infrastructure for the customer side. We've been super blessed to not have a distribution problem. We do mostly triage in sales versus outreach and, pounding the pavement and calls. And again, I cannot begin to tell you how much of a blessing that is, that, you know, I've met somebody early on and told them what we do. And he goes, "You're kidding me." And I said, "No, that's what we do." And he told somebody else, and he told somebody else. And before you know it, you know, again, the pandemic helped from this perspective, but, you know, we started in Tennessee, and then we go to California, and then we're now in New York, and now we're in Florida, and it's just everywhere. And it's because people started to understand what we were doing and share that. But as we grow, the magic is we need to make sure that our employees that are trusting us with that solution, that we're available to them, the companies who are managing the plans, that we're available to help decode things and educate them. And so as we grow, we've got to build that infrastructure there. And so we'll grow as we grow. But listen, whether I run a company that's 40 lives, 100 lives, 250 lives, 500, to me, it doesn't matter. It matters that what we have built is continuing to grow and get better every day, because we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. There are things that we learn every single day. And as long as we're growing responsibly and we're able to serve our customers, both on the brokerage side and the employer groups, then that's how I will evaluate success, not by the head count.
So just two things based on what you just said. You're the first CEO to admit that size does not matter, so that's great. And and two, that person was right. You're resourceful. Look at that. I mean, you're running, you know, a company that should be, you know, 3, 4, 5x of what you're at in terms of employee size based on your revenue. So that's phenomenal, and kudos to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's incredible. So what, you know, we're 2 more months, we're into 2024. What would you like to see, you know, where would you like to see True Captive be in, you know, December 31st, 2024?
That's a great question. And I will tell you, it happened at the beginning of last year, where we were on the scene, we were growing, and then we started to get mentioned in the same sentence as the biggest names in our industry. And that was incredibly flattering. It was like a, you know, kind of like a whoa moment. And so, you know, as we thrust into this year, we're performing incredibly well in terms of our loss ratio, which a loss ratio is simply the amount of insurance you purchase and the amount of risk that you have. So I would tell you that we're one of the leaders from that perspective. So we continue to be mentioned with some of the biggest names, and that is flattering. I am greedy. And when I say I'm greedy, I mean, I don't want to stop at how well we've done this year. I want to go into 24, and I want to continue to learn more about our customers. Where can we get better? The things where the industry is trending, how can we be ahead of that and create solutions where we're able to respond in good time, in real time. You don't have to have the damn answer when it happens, because that would be foreseeing the future. People that foresee the future are lucky. They're good at assimilating information and creating a probability factor. Like, that's good, but you still didn't know. It was an educated guess, and you lucked out. So in that sense, is be adaptable and be prepared. So I want us just to continue doing that and drive our loss ratios down, because the loss ratio being low is a direct reflection of our groups having a great experience. I talked to a group yesterday where I was saying, I'm flattered and I'm humbled that people are looking at our company for the things that they're doing. And I'm incredibly proud of the team and the work that they've accomplished. Like you mentioned, it's a small but mighty team. They've accomplished what, 3-4 times people should be accomplishing. That work is only possible if the groups who have placed their trust in us believe in the things we're sharing with them and taking the steps that we ask them to. Conversely, some of the great broker partners that we work with throughout the country, believing us and trusting us with their customer. We don't sell direct, so they have to trust us that we won't mess up. And if we do mess up, we're going to fix it. And they've heard it before, right? They've heard it from everybody. The lack of trust in this industry is staggering because everybody's messed up somewhere. The biggest mistake is they didn't go, I messed up, and let's work together to create a solution, because we'll retain business that way. But it's those producers that have trusted us with the thing that creates the livelihood and their ability to fund their family and fund things that they enjoy doing. And so as we move into 24, it's just continuing to do that and recognize who's helping us be successful. it really is a combination of people. And I joke about this all the time. Much of what we've done is common sense. And I think we've cornered the market in common sense, and common sense hasn't cost us a dollar. So I think that's what I want to see in 2024 is us to continue to grow responsibly, because that's how you build a program in insurance, is you do it responsibly. Dramatic growth is great. It's fun. It looks cool on a spreadsheet. Lots of people like it who are investing in that. That's awesome. But if you do it in the wrong way, it's going to come down as equally fast. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in sustainable growth that will build year over year, that'll drive value for our customers, that'll drive value for everybody who's involved. And you do that through strong partnerships. You do that through listening and learning. And I want our team to continue to do that.
Two groups I try to help the most in this podcast is with great leadership advice from great leaders like yourself, David. Is first group is recent college graduates. So obviously you were one of those. And what advice would you give them as they embark on their first professional job and begin their career journey?
Find a balance between listening to someone and taking it at gospel and challenging everything somebody says in your mind. I don't mean challenge it like buck the system. I mean challenge it like, if someone says 2 + 2 is 5, and they're widely knowledgeable, they're very respected, and 2 + 2 is 4, work that out on a piece of paper. Like, try to understand it, because that does two things. It makes you smarter because you're learning to problem solve. You're using the power of deduction, right? That helps you understand that. Now, I said do it in your head, because if you buck the system or you challenge everything as a recent college grad, you are going to be a recently exited employee. So be careful with that. But I think the second thing is try to learn from as many people as you possibly can. But you're going to look for two things. One is what to do, and the other one is what not to do. Because there are many leaders that I've learned amazing lessons from, that they do things that I was like, wow, that is fascinating. I cannot even believe that anyone could do that. And then there's also leaders that I've gone, are you freaking kidding me? That's the most basic thing you should never do, and you just did it. So learn, what do I want to do and what don't I want to do, and continue to shape yourself. That's how you do it. And listen, I promise you, the people that work for me, they're learning lots of cool things that I do, and hopefully it helps them propel their career with us. And ultimately, if they ever move on in that next spot, but I'm sure they're learning stuff not to do. And that's okay, as long as you don't make the big mistakes, right? Like that's what I try to avoid. So the first one is challenge everything, but do it privately. Really try to put it under the microscope, understand it, use the power of deduction. And then number two, learn from people what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. The second group is, most people come out of college or individual contributors. So then they get that promotion. Now you're responsible for a team of 3 or 5 or 10, whatever it is. What advice would you have for that group as they begin their leadership journey?
Be radically honest with yourself. This is still something that I battle with today. I'm good at what I do. Uncharacteristically, I'm good at different things, and I'm blessed to have the skills that I do. And a lot of times I don't see them as being exceptional skills. I kind of think that everybody can do them. Well, that's cool. I mean, that's fun, but here's the problem. If I expect people to operate in my capacity, that's not fair to them, because they aren't going to operate in my capacity. Hopefully I can't operate in their capacity either. We've built a strong team with different skills. But when you get thrust into the role, you probably were evaluated for doing something great. Maybe you're the best salesperson on the floor. Maybe you were the best operational leader. Maybe you built the best code, whatever. You might suck at leadership. You just might. And if you do, that doesn't mean that you can't get better at it. It also might mean that you might not be ready for it, or you might never be ready for it. You got to be honest with yourself, but don't expect people to do the things that you do or do them the way that you do. That is really important. I had a leader once tell me, clarity is the friend of accountability. If you're clear with people what you want, then you can hold them accountable. So really try to understand that they're not going to be you. They're not going to do it your way. And if you expect them to do it that way, you need to be clear about it and have a conversation so they know what they need to do so they can meet expectations. And if they don't, since you were clear. Now you can hold them accountable and find out where the defect is. But when you get promoted into that first role, you've got to be super honest with yourself, and that's where things get broken down, is you expect everybody to operate your way. And they're just not. And so you're either going to be super depressed and disappointed, or it's going to be an opportunity to go, okay, let me take what I'm really good at. Let me help them understand where they can get better. Let me give them 10% of me. And if they take 10% of me and then they can go make it into something awesome for themselves, enjoy that ride.
Yeah, I love that quote and that philosophy. I had not heard that before, but it's incredible. David, you've brought True Captive Insurance in the last 3+4 years to a very great journey, and I can't wait to see what you do in the future. So thank you for being part of the Corporate Couch today.
Great. Thank you for having me. It's been a great time.
It was so great to catch up with David. I'd like so many things about him. Besides, he shares his love like I do for the New York Yankees. So
Yeah.
But I love how he was recruited basically he was recommended by several people for this well-known philanthropic organization. And, he was the candidate of choice, but they were using an outside recruiter. And this recruiter was kind of a jerk, right? And basically, basically had a line during the interview. I'm not sure what you're good at, but you're resourceful. And it was a criticism. Like, he was criticizing that he was resourceful. And that fueled David, much like Michael Jordan got fueled by criticism. I'm not saying David may or may not be the GOAT of the NBA, but for CEOs, but he could be. But he fueled that in a positive way, and it drove him. And then, years later, he founds a company, True Captive. He's the CEO, and he's resourceful. And here's a CEO with no ego, because whether you're a CEO, a VP, a director, a lot of these leaders, they want the biggest org chart possible because it means power, right? And here's a CEO where it says size does not matter. He's, employee size. Like, he's running that company with 8 people, and he says that our revenues we should have 30 to 40 employees. So he is resourceful. And that's a positive, and it fueled him, and I just love that that part of the story. I think it's incredible.
That's similar to the concept of judo, where you use some weakness and use it against you, and where the recruiter was trying to use that as, I don't know, as an insult, but certainly not a flattering observation, and he used it in his power. So,
Joe, what was your take on the episode?
Well, he used one thing that was kind of a throwaway line, but it really struck with me. Most of his career has been not in insurance, where he is now, but was in HR. And HR has always kind of fascinated me. I've always tried to figure out, well, what is it that attracts people to HR? What do they actually do or anything? One of the lines that he said was that HR has no authority. And I think what he meant to say was essentially all they can do is implement. They can implement either what the law says or what upper management says, but they are, what was it that you said one time, that HR is the most risk averse?
They're most risk averse functional area, I believe.
Because they can't do anything. All they can do is implement. And he needed that as an escape mechanism. He got out of HR, I think, essentially because of that, because he felt like that they had no authority, and had to get into a situation in insurance where he felt like he was a little bit more in control. I don't think that he meant that really as a significant piece of his interview, but it really struck me as odd, that whole concept of HR without authority.
Like Pamela Norton said, the great CEO that we interviewed I don't know what episode, but she's the CEO of Title Chain, serial tech entrepreneur. But she started her career in HR, and she said, if you're creative, HR is not the right place.
Right, because all she was doing was just filling out forms
right.
all the time. Like, here's a form.
And I'm not saying, there's great HR people, and they should, great HR people help create a great culture. So
yeah, we don't want to lose half of our HR audience. We love all HR people. It's just kind of in a category all of its own.
Exactly. Joe, what leadership advice do you have for our audience today?
We are going to go to that great philosopher, Lucy Van Pelt. And Lucy one time said, "Did you know that water is the most essential element of life? Because without water, you can't make coffee."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.